Welcome again. Today we'll be talking about an interesting topic. I know if you've attended our webinars before, a lot of the topics are kind of range from a wide variety, from InfoPath topics to SharePoint topics. Today we're going to do a little bit of a different kind of webinar, a change of pace. A while back I did another InfoPath 101 topic talking about the rules manager, and this is kind of going along the lines of the same series, kind of taking a step back and looking at the InfoPath fundamentals and talking about a couple of the features that in InfoPath that are pretty core, to make sure that everyone that has experienced InfoPath or has not even used InfoPath before, perhaps they'll learn something new. Or perhaps this may serve as kind of a refresher course. And I'll talk a little bit about the InfoPath 101. We have this new series, this new training course that we're calling InfoPath 101 a little bit at the end. And this is kind of this is one of the topics that we're taking out of that course, just to give you guys a little bit of a flavor of what to expect. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk about that at the very end. All right, so with that, the agenda today is, as usual, we'll start the presentation. I have quite a few slides to get through today, so I'll try to get through that as fast as I can to leave most of the time for the demos. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to post those questions in the chat window throughout the presentation. It's a pretty short presentation, it's about 20 minutes or so, so I will probably try to power through as much as I can and then answer your questions at the very end of the presentation. But feel free to go and put your questions in the chat window. I'll answer them on a first-come, first basis at the end. All right, so the topic today is secondary data connections and filters. So let's talk about data connections first. So what are data connections? So in InfoPath, what's really great is that InfoPath is very easy to go out and connect to external data sources. There's many different types of external data sources that InfoPath connects to. There's SharePoint, SQL. You can connect to an XML file. You can connect to other types of databases. You can connect to web services and so forth. There's the list actually goes on. And actually, because you can connect to a web service, it's actually really, really powerful. And you can write your own custom web service if you wanted to and be able to go and pull in any data you want into your InfoPath form. So why actually not store the InfoPath form, the data in the form itself?
Anson, can I just interrupt you for a second? Are you sharing out your screen?
Sure. No, I should be. Is it not working?
It's still showing my training slides, sorry.
Okay, 1 second.
Thanks, Thomas, for the heads up.
There you go. Can you see my screen now?
It's loading, yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. It's okay. You folks didn't miss too much. It was just my title slide that you missed. This is just my first slide here. Okay. Where was I? So yeah, that's right. With external data, why wouldn't you actually want to store some of this data in the form itself? A lot of times you want to abstract the data. You have a lot of data in your form itself already, so this way it's easy to go in and take out the data that's not necessary in your actual form. A lot of times you want to avoid duplicating your data. You want to make sure that when you're actually putting your data inside the form, that you're not actually going and replicating it elsewhere, whether it's in a SharePoint list or whether it's an XML file. If it's living there already, why not just pull it in? Why do you have to copy it into the form? It just doesn't make sense. It also makes sure that the form is being very performant. It doesn't kind of bog down your form by having to load all this data and store it at the same time. And lastly, and probably the most important point, is actually data-driven design. You want to make sure that at some point, if you have logic built around your form, that you want this logic to be data-driven. And this is great because then now you don't have to go in and change any of the logic in the form itself. All you need to do is actually go in and change your data on your external data source, and that'll actually change your how your form functions as as the form kind of continues to live on. This is great because it's easy to maintain. You don't have to republish your form every single time. All you need to do is just go and update your data, and basically your form will get updated at the same time your data gets updated. All right, so there's two different types of data connections. There's a submit data connection and a receive data connection. If you go to the data tab, you can pretty much see all the different data connections that you can have access to with InfoPath. A little bit more about the two different types of data connections. We have our submit data connection. You have XML data, being sent to an external source for consumption. Basically you could submit to different types, like a web service. You could submit to a SQL server if you wanted to. A web service is pretty popular simply because then now you can take that XML data and parse it however which way you want and store it in whatever external source you want. You can also submit to a SharePoint library. There's many different kinds. And the second type is receive. You could pull in data from pretty much any external resource you want. You could use it in the form. Some examples of how you would want to use them is to be able to populate a repeating table. Maybe you want to populate a drop-down or use the data as some sort of logic. All right, a little bit more about the different types of submit data connections, and I'll show a little bit of a quick demo. Web service. With web services, you can build your own custom web service that consumes that consumes InfoPath forms. An example of this is DBXL. We have done webinars on DBXL in the past, but there's other custom web services out there potentially that can consume InfoPath forms. Typically, using a submit to a web service is a more of an advanced scenario. Because a lot of times with web service, you have to know the web service itself. A lot of times they'll have parameters as well, so you need to know what to set the parameters to. And a lot of times you have to, write or host your own web service in order to utilize this this function, this web service feature. Another type of submit data connection is to a document library. This is a little bit more of a simpler scenario. You can go in and actually save the XML to a form library in SharePoint. It's fairly straightforward to set up. All you need to do is specify the address of your library. InfoPath can actually create the library for you when you publish, or you can actually create your library beforehand and then actually save that URL and create the submit connection to that particular library. A lot of times what's very useful as well in maybe your particular scenario is that if you wanted to go and submit to different multiple libraries, a good example, a good scenario for this is if I have maybe an expense report and I have different departments in my organization. I have an HR department, I have a legal department, I have a finance department, and I want to go in and actually set up multiple different libraries for each of these departments, even though it may be the same form. So I can go in based on my logic. I have a drop down, say, on my form. I pick HR, and then I can go and now submit to the HR library. Or if I select finance, and then I go and submit to my finance expense report library. So that's really useful in being able to set up different submit connections to submit to different multiple libraries. Another popular submit data connection is an email. What's great about email is that it's pretty flexible in terms of how you set it up. You can specify who you send it to in the to line. You can specify the CC line, the BCC line, the subject of the email. And what's great about any of those is that you can actually use logic. You can actually use the fields in the form to go and specify what those are. You can make the form be attached as an attachment, or you can have it be in line with your email. If you're using Outlook in your organization, it integrates really, really well with Outlook. It's very easy to go in and add an InfoPath folder to actually sort all of your InfoPath forms to in Outlook. And you can actually create rules in Outlook as well to do something different when it receives an InfoPath form. SharePoint List is also another popular one. Definitely recommend this one for first-time users. What's really great about submitting to a SharePoint List is that it's very simple to use, very easy to set up. It's only available for SharePoint List forms, but yeah, like I said, it's definitely recommended for those brand new to InfoPath and SharePoint because it's just very easy to set up. All you need to do is just kind of create your list, and your submit data connection automatically works for you. And every time you go and fill out your form, it just goes and submits the data to the SharePoint list, and it saves it as a brand new list item. So there are actually many more data connections. I don't have a lot of time to go over all of them, so I just wanted to go over just those few. Those are probably the most popular ones, so just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor there. I do have a little quick demo here just to show you. I do have an example of how to create a submit data connection, and one of the simplest ones is through an email form. So I'm going to open up the designer here, and I'm not going to do anything fancy to the form. I just want to show you the data connection part of things. So what I'm going to do here is go to the Data tab, and like I said here, you can see all of the different data connections that you have available to you. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Data Connections here. I'm going to add in data connection. And so here's where you pick whether you want to submit data connections or receive data connection. Click on Next, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to send an email message. So if I click on Next here, so I can go in and I can specify who I want to send it to. Send it to myself. I can see anybody else I want. And if you notice here, there's a bunch of formula buttons on the very right-hand side. So you can go and click on these formula buttons. Perhaps there's a text box on the form that you can type in email addresses. So you can go ahead and you can add that field. So then that way it's dynamic on who it sends it to. Maybe you want to do a lookup, for example, and the lookup will actually go in and check a SharePoint list and see based on maybe the department that you had selected, it knows who to send this particular email to. Subject is really cool. I can go in and I can add, I can maybe create my own subject. What's useful here is that you want to make sure that the subject is actually unique. So I'm just going to go ahead and come up with something unique here. What I'm doing here is I'm just putting my username, just putting a dash in between, and I'm using a timestamp, which is the now function. And I can just go ahead and add that as a form. I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit fast here, but I wanted to make sure I get to my second demo as well. And that's pretty much it. Setting it up is fairly simple. You just set up your two-line, you can set up your subject. For the most part, I just click on Next for the rest of it. You can actually go and modify some of those settings, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. You don't really need to go in and change much. Go ahead and add a text box here. And let's go ahead and preview this form. So, hello. And I'm going to go and submit the form. And then you can see here, this message will pop up. It sends it to me because I had hard-coded that, but you can dynamically set that if you wanted to. You can see here my subject is my username. I added a little dash, and this is what the time looked like. This is the timestamp that the now function returned. Great. Go ahead and hit send, and then it goes in and sends the form to myself. I don't have my Outlook open, unfortunately, so otherwise I'd show you that it sent it to me. But that's pretty much it. It's pretty easy to set up an email data connection. Like I said, it's one of the easiest submit data connections to do. Feel free to go and explore that. I would also recommend doing a document library data connection. That was also very easy to set up. So if you are curious in figuring out how to set that up, try it on your own, and if you are having any problems, feel free to go and post in our forums, and someone is more than happy to go and help you out in the InfoPath dev forums. All right, now we'll quickly talk about receive data connections and then wrap up with my last demo here. The first receive data connection that I'll talk about is the SOAP web service. SharePoint has a lot of SOAP web services that they offer out of the box. There's the copy, there's the list web service, and these are actually really useful because then you can now use this and manipulate a bunch of stuff in SharePoint List. For example, you could use the user profile service. That's the example I have on this on the screen right now. And I mentioned earlier DBXL. DBXL is also an example of a web service. If you do have a third-party web service like DBXL, you could utilize that. The example I have here is Query Builder. Query Builder will go out to your SQL database and actually build a query and return data to your InfoPath form that you can use as, logic. You can use as populating a drop-down. There's many different applications of doing this. So web services are really, really popular, but again, a little bit more of an advanced scenario, especially if you are a beginner. It's a little bit tricky sometimes to get it all set up, especially because there's usually parameters you have to go and specify in order for the web service to return what you want it to return. Another different type of web service is a REST web service. This is brand new to 2010. They added REST web service to data connections. It basically allows you to connect to an existing REST web service. So there's a bunch of REST web services available out there on the internet. A lot of popular ones are just map data. You can actually bring in map data into your InfoPath form if you want to show a map. That's really, really useful. You can do a search through Bing Maps or Google Maps if you wanted to. And I do have a link on this slide here if you are interested in figuring out more about REST web services. You could set up a receive data connection to an XML document. Basically, you could use this for secondary storage. You store the XML document as a resource file. In the data tab, there is a resource file button. You can go in and store that XML document there, and then when you're creating your data connection, point it to that XML document. And what's really good about this is that you can actually use another InfoPath form to actually create this XML file. Hello.
I'm back at the house. Briefly was in this lazy boy looking through the window.
All right. And yeah, and those are XML documents. All right, another receive data connection type is a SharePoint Library or List. Very, very popular. I definitely recommend this one. This is very easy to set up. All you really need to do is go into SharePoint. If you're familiar with SharePoint, create your own custom list. You can have a library as well and have promoted fields in your library. But really, SharePoint List is the easiest one here. And all you need to do is then connect your InfoPath form to the SharePoint List, specify what fields you want to return to your form, and basically that's it. You can just set it to populate on load, and then once you do that, all you need to do then is just use the list, whether it's in a drop-down control, whether it's in a list control, whether it's in a repeating table, and use the data that it returns into your form. Very, very easy to use, and I'll actually show you a quick demo of this in just a little bit. Brand new 2010, specific to the SharePoint List data connection, there's a concept of query fields. So query fields are great because then what you could do is now take a parameter, take basically a search criteria term, and put it into a particular field. Query the SharePoint List data connection, and then the SharePoint List data connection will return only the items that match that particular criteria that you had specified. And this is really useful because then now you can actually go in and query the SharePoint List as much as you want. It's pretty fast, it's very performant, so you could actually utilize this as much as you want in your form if you wanted to. And again, this will be in my demo really quick here. Last slide before I get to my demo. Just wanted to quickly talk about filters. Filters are really, really useful. I'll talk about the difference between query fields and filters. They are very important for different scenarios, but basically filters, what filters do is you have all your data in your form. Perhaps you have maybe 100 fields, and you want to go and populate a drop-down, but 100 fields is a lot, especially to view in a drop-down. It's very difficult. That little scroll bar is really, really difficult to grab and drag around. So instead, what you want to do is apply a filter to go and filter down, reduce the number of options inside the control. So that's a really useful feature. Basically, you can go and pull in all this data. InfoPath will only display the entries that match your particular criteria for your filter. Some applications for this, you'll hear cascading drop-downs. That's a very useful application. I do also have a tutorial video if you go and check out our YouTube channel on cascading drop-downs if you're interested. And search data. You can actually go in and type in a search criteria in your text box and basically filter any values inside a drop-down inside a repeating control. All right, so I have a couple minutes for demos here, and then we're going to go and pause for questions. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. All right. I don't need that anymore. Let's open up a new one. Okay. Actually, before I do that, I just wanted to show you real quick. So here's my SharePoint list. I created a very simple SharePoint list. Basically, it's different types of food. That's what you see here on the left. These are all the different types of food that I have here. And each different type of food is associated to a food type. So I just have 3 food types. I have fruits, vegetables, and junk food. So that's what my SharePoint list looks like. And this is the SharePoint list that I'm going to use to pull into my InfoPath form. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create a data connection to that list. So I'll go click Data Connections, click on Add, and here I'm going to do Receive Data. And for here, where do I want to receive it from? I want to receive it from a SharePoint list. So I'm going to pick the SharePoint Library list option. And I want to enter the location of my SharePoint site. So what I usually do is I go back to the SharePoint site itself, and then copy the URL and paste it here in my dialog, the connection wizard dialog. So I can go ahead and pick which list or library I want to go and retrieve the data from. In this case, it's food. These are all the columns that are available for me that I can go and pull back. So make sure to check off all the columns that you actually want to pull into your form. Don't check off everything if you don't actually plan on using everything. That way, in case there's a lot of data, you don't want to make it a little bit slower unnecessarily by pulling out all the data that you don't need. You can ignore the screen. Usually I don't store or copy the data. I mentioned earlier duplicating the data, so this is not an ideal way of using that data list. And it's going to be turned on by default, but just want to call it out. Make sure that you automatically retrieve the data when the form is open. That way, when the form is open, it'll automatically retrieve all the data and populate all the drop-downs or anything that you need to automatically when the form is opened. All right, so click on Finished, click on Close. And just to show you real quick what just happened, I'm going to go in. All I did here was I went to the secondary data connection. I went to food. I expanded all the fields, all the data fields, and I'll drag and drop this as a repeating table onto the form. And if I preview, you can see that it pulled in all the data. All this data matched the data that I have on my SharePoint list that I showed you. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. The next thing I want to show you is queryFields here. So what I'm going to do is let's go and add in this queryField food type. And all I'm doing here is you can see that there's queryFields and there's data fields. Make sure that you're not mixing them up. What's easy to tell the difference is that the data field will have a repeating node. This SharePoint list item is repeating, and this one's not. And the reason for queryFields here is that now it's going to replicate what I have in my data fields, because I can go in and specify a query field, and what I can do is I can then now query this data connection, and then it'll only return the entries that match the particular criteria that I had specified in the query fields. So I added food type as a text box. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and add a button. Let's go ahead and rename the button here to query. We'll add a quick rule here on my rule query, and I'm going to go and query for data, and I'm just going to query the food data connection. Okay, so let's go in and preview now. So here's all of the data that I have. It automatically loaded, but what if I only want to show fruits? There we go. Go fruits. If I query, you can see here it only shows the food types that equal fruits. I can go and I can type in junk food, click on query again, and then now it'll only show me the food types that equal junk food. So basically what this is doing is very simple. All it's doing is setting the query field, and I'm setting the query field to junk food. And then I'm going to go and query the list data connection again. And now it sees that the food type field has junk food in it, so it's only going to go and return all the entries that match that particular criteria. So no matter what, it'll actually go in and filter out any of the other ones that don't have this food type. So if I put in something else that doesn't match anything, you'll see that it returns absolutely nothing. All right, so that's useful. That's great. I can actually put this into a drop-down control if I wanted to. So let's go put a drop-down list box and go into the properties. And here I can go in and I can get choices from an external data source. And sure, let's just go ahead and use the value as title and display name as title. So again, let's preview it. And you'll see here the drop-down will display pretty much everything that's in this repeating table. If I go in and I put in my food type, and now you can see that it filtered down the food type here in this drop-down as well. Alternatively, instead of using queries, I can use filters. So basically what I can do here is let's go in and add another text box. And we'll just name this filter. And what I can do here instead, so this is a little bit different, but it's going to basically come up with the same idea. I'm going to go in, what I did was I clicked on entries, this select XPath. I can click on filter data, and I can click on add. And now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do when food type is equal to that new field that I had entered. I believe I didn't rename it, but it's just called field 2. Click on OK. So OK out of all these dialogues. And then now when I preview, and if I type in fruits here, you can see that it only shows me all of the entries that have fruits. So if I go and clear that out now, it's going to look for all the blank ones, which makes sense. So yeah, so it shows me all the ones that are blank, which makes sense because it's looking for where the food type is equal to whatever I have in this text box. So since none of the food types are blank, it's showing me nothing. But then if I type something that's valid, so if I type in junk food, it's going to show me all of the entries that are junk food. So hopefully that's that makes a lot of sense to you folks. The big difference here is that with queryFields, you're actually going to the server and querying that data, so that data is being pulled from the server every single time. Whereas with filters, you're actually pulling in all the data once and then simply showing different sets of data. So if you're kind of looking at your wire between your computer and the server, using queryFields, you're going to use that wire a lot. But if you are using filter, you basically download all the data from that wire, and then you keep it on your machine, and then every single time you're actually going and changing that filter, it's just going to go and show you different sets of data. So that's basically the difference. There are some scenarios where you want to use both, especially when it comes to performance. So definitely think about, what's the best way of utilizing queryFields, what's the best way of utilizing filters, and then decide which one is the right one for you. So I know I went through that a little bit fast, and I apologize because I'm actually over on time right now. It's 8:32 according to my watch. But if you do have any questions, I've already heard there's some questions already in the link window. Feel free to go and jump into the link window and ask me a question. If you want me to kind of dive in deeper into any part of the demo, I'd be more than happy to do that. All right, so let's just wrap things up real quick here. So I do have a link here. This is talking about the InfoPath training course. I do have a little short blurb here as well. Actually, this next slide is probably a little bit better. We do have a couple of training courses coming up. Marcy, would you want to talk about those a little bit right now?
Sure. We've got two different classes coming up in September. One is they're both the master training class. We've got an online, which is 5 half-days, or a 3-day in-person, and those are still open for enrollment. And we do have a little bit of a webinar special for those who have attended the webinar today. Can get a small discount on registration if they'd like, so just email me or email course manager at Qdabra.com for that code. And we are very pleased to announce our new InfoPath 101 class. So if you liked what you saw today and you want more of this, we are rolling out a brand new course. And we're actually doing a pilot next week. Anson's going to be presenting a 5 half-day brand new 101 course, and we have a little bit of a special on that since it's our first run through. If you're willing to be a tester, then send us an email and we can let you know how to be part of that. Otherwise, the first regular date will be October 15th. So again, you can get more information about both of those classes by sending an email to coursemanager@Qdabra.com. And Anson, I believe there is a couple of questions in the box already.
Great. Thanks, Marcy. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of quickly add on to Marcy's comment. If you did like what you see today, InfoPath 101 is great. Basically, I took this course from this content for the webinar from the InfoPath 101 course, and a lot of people have taken the master training and has said this is great, but wanted to recommend it to their coworkers. But unfortunately, they think that the master training is a little bit over their head simply because they're not familiar with InfoPath at all. They're not really tech savvy at all. InfoPath 101 is great because you absolutely need no previous experience whatsoever. It assumes that you pretty much know nothing, and it's going to start from the fundamentals. It's going to start from the very core of InfoPath, basically introducing InfoPath from scratch. So if that is sort of where you are in terms of your experience level, InfoPath 101 is great for you. So feel free to ping me or a course manager if you want more information. Be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. All right, so with that, it's question time. So let's go ahead and open up the chat window here and answer some questions. All right, will InfoPath out of the box submit to and retrieve data using a data connection from SQL Azure? So, hi Bruce. So that's a really good question. If I had to guess, I actually don't know the answer 100%, but if I had to guess, the answer is probably no. So InfoPath is very limited in terms of being able to connect to SQL. It's actually very difficult to go and set up InfoPath forms to a SQL database, in my opinion. I think it's a little bit. You have to jump through a couple of hoops in order to get that to work. I think DBXL is a lot of better solution. It's very easy to set up, and that will work with SQL Azure as far as I know. So that would be my recommendation. In terms of actually the out-of-box functionality with SQL Azure, if you are curious, I can go and do a little bit of investigation and see what the support is. But off the top of my head, I don't think it's supported. But again, I can go and look at that a little bit more if you are curious.
And Anson, I just wanted to jump in and say, those who are not familiar with DBXL services, there is a fully functional free trial available on our website.
So actually, just to expand on Marcus's question here, that's a good question. So there's a couple of ways to actually go and retrieve the data. I had actually gone in and retrieved the data when the form was loaded, and that's what that checkbox was that I called out at the end of the data connection wizard. So that's very important to have checked off, simply because then now you don't have to worry about having to query the data every single time. But then if you also notice, I also created a button, and that button had a query rule on it. And that's also important because every time you will go and change the query field, it's not going to go in and query the data connection automatically. You could have it set up to query the data connection automatically if you wanted to. And basically, how you get that to set up is you go in, specify a field in your form, and then whenever that field changes, you can actually go and query. So you don't have to go ahead and click your button if you wanted to avoid the button click. So that's perfectly fine too if you wanted. Now, there's also some applications where you don't want to go and query on load, so you want to uncheck that button. And sometimes you'd want to, delay the population of this data connection, simply because maybe only the users are going to use it 10% of the time. Maybe they're only going to use it when they're dealing with a particular client or dealing with a particular section. So in that case, maybe you don't want to slow down the load for the form itself and actually query it when you need to. And in that case, you could just use rules to specify when you want to query the particular data connection. And that's pretty easy to set up, and as you saw me do with the button. I'll hang around for a few more minutes in case there are any other last-minute questions. But otherwise, thank you everybody for attending. Really appreciate you guys coming out and looking at, coming and attending these webinars. If this is your first webinar, we do this every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, so feel free to come in and attend. But otherwise, thanks everybody.